through some of the headlines, as I mentioned, from India's gaming industry over the last year, the last financial year. We're going to be looking at market sizing, we're going to be looking at monetization, user behavior, and some of the industry trends, as well as the outlook from an M&A investment perspective, exit perspective as well. A couple of hygiene points before we get started. Reminder that the data collected here is for the financial year ending 2021 to 22. And this is a preview of the report that we're going to be doing. It's an executive summary. This is the first time we're showing it anywhere in the world. But there will be a full report which we'll be putting up on our website, lumikai.com, a little bit later in the month. So please keep a lookout for that. This is a summary slide. I'm actually going to jump forward a little bit and we'll just get straight into it. Great. So let's kick off with market size and growth. The big headline here is that the industry has grown over the last financial year 33% since 2020 to $2.6 billion. And it's going to continue growing at an estimated 20% CAGR over the next 5 years to $8.6 billion in revenue. So, you know, phenomenal increase in revenue over the last year, and we're going to see that sustained at around a 27% growth rate over the next 5 years, ending fiscal year 27. I think what's interesting is that, you know, contrary to popular belief, where, you know, RMG has been the biggest growth driver for games in the industry. Now, you know, RMG, of course, is a very big and valuable sector in the market. It has been, it continues to be, and it will be in the future. What's been interesting is that a large portion of the market is, in fact, growing. The growth driver of that market is, in fact, casual and mid-core. And, you know, if we look at casual and mid-core, this year we've seen an increase in mid-core at 32%. So that's the fastest growing category across gaming over the last year. Esports also growing at 32%. And, you know, that's reflected also, if you see, in the growth of in-app purchases. If we look at growth by revenue stream, in-app purchases is growing faster than any other monetization revenue stream in India, which is, you know, fantastic. Casual also growing very, very quickly, about half a billion dollars in revenue over this year. So, you know, if we project forward a little bit, we can see about $3 billion in white space and upside in the RMG market over the next 5 years, $2 billion in mid-core, and a very healthy billion coming into casual. So, you know, if you just look at the landscape today, you know, a lot of the, you know, the unicorns in the space, the large valuation companies, the revenue rich companies are in the fantasy and RMG space, which is great for the market. But we're seeing $3 billion in white space upside over the next 5 years in mid-core and casual. So, you know, great news if you're a developer building more sophisticated games, especially if you're looking to integrate in-app purchases as well. The methodology on this, we're going to talk about a little bit with Prashanth at Deloitte when we get onto the Q&A. So let's move forward from here. Okay, so let's move on to the outlook from a demand and a supply perspective. The big headline, I think, from a user perspective is that India, as of now, is the largest consumer market for mobile games in the world. We have seen 15 billion game downloads in the last financial year. That is a phenomenal number. And, you know, if you look at just the bottom right over here, 15 billion, there have been some COVID tailwinds over the last couple of years. So, you know, even in, you know, 2020, we saw about 6.5 billion downloads for games. Very, very healthy. That's increased dramatically to 10 billion and then 15 billion over the last year. At a massive, massive number. And that's obviously, that's more than China, US, Brazil, and Indonesia. So India is the largest consumer of gaming apps in the world today. You know, I think the second big headline here is the number of gamers in the market. You can see in the top left here that we have now surpassed 500 million gamers. That's up from 450 million gamers in the last year before that, and about double the number from about 4 years ago. So again, we've seen some COVID tailwinds here, 250 million up to 2xing to 507 million gamers. That's the total universe of gamers that exist in the market today. And, you know, that is a phenomenal number. Again, that is larger, just for context, than the entire US market and Western Europe combined. So fantastic numbers there. Let's take a look at what this translates to in terms of paying gamers. So the number of paying gamers now at a conversion rate of about 24% is 120 million in the country. What's interesting here is that the number of paying users or paying gamers in the country is actually growing at about double the rate of new gamers coming into the market. So both healthy numbers at about 12% and 25%. But there's been an acceleration in the number of paying users over the last 2 to 3 years. This is being driven by what we call NPUs, new paying users. So first-time new paying users that are coming into the market. India has the largest proportion of those out of any country in the world now 3 years in a row. You combine that with the scale of the market and a very, very exciting story for the number of paid gamers that are in the country. If you're a developer, you're building mid-core games, casual games, in-app purchases, great time to be in the market. The number of paying gamers is at a record rate, and that is going to index, especially as mid-core casual in-app purchases grow over the next 3 to 4 years. And I think we'll close just on the supply side over here, just the number of Indian game developers. I mean, this is an astonishing number here. Over 900 gaming companies in the market. You know, you go back to 2017, back when I had my startup, my small startup in Bangalore, we had 30 to 40 game companies in the market. Now that has been, you know, an almost geometric increase up to 2021 with 500 game companies, nearly doubled that over the course of this year, which is fantastic. So, you know, I think what's interesting here is that it's not just the quantum of developers that are coming into the market or game founders, it's also just the quality and the overall aspiration. A lot of the folks that we've met at Lumikai over the last year and just over the last day or so at India GDC really have come in with a very high aspiration horizon. They want to build for the future. They want to build incredible experiences that are going to be like nothing we've ever seen before. And, you know, that is something which we're really excited about and, you know, bodes well for what we're going to see down the line, 2 or 3 years down the line when it comes to investments, M&A, and what we call liquidity events or exits, IPOs or sales, which we'll come on to. Okay, so now let's talk about engagement. Time spent on average on a weekly basis is now up to 8.5 hours on mobile games. That's up from 7 hours the year before. And we also see that there's a outlier cohort within mid-core, if you look at the right in the top left tab here. More than 10% of mid-core users are actually spending more than 10 hours a week playing mid-core games. And we expect to see that grow as mid-core continues to rise versus other categories. This is a real theme that we've seen over the last year and the year before that. Mid-core games are growing at an absolute click in the country, and it's not just the battle royale games. We've seen this across the board. Now, if we look at the time spent on the top 5 casual games, this is now game time, so time spent by user per day. So it's essentially session time. This is a very healthy 31 minutes to 56 minutes for the casual genre. So we've got Royal Match, Candy Crush, Coin Master, Ludo King, Carrom Pool. 2 of those are domestic and 3 are international. Very healthy numbers, anywhere between 30 minutes and 56 minutes. These are the top 5 in the casual category. And then when we go on to mid-core, I mean, those numbers are even more impressive, right? So if you look at the top 3, you've got Free Fire and BGMI, no surprises there. But also Genshin Impact, COD Mobile, and Clash of Clans. And again, you know, this narrative that mid-core is entirely dominated by the battle royale genre. To some extent is true, of course. There have been incredibly successful titles in the space, shooters especially. But Clash of Clans still doing very well. In the top 5, 40 minutes daily engagement is considerable. And Genshin Impact, which is a really interesting case study. This is a, you know, mid to hardcore role-playing game, kind of like a Zelda Breath of the Wild style, kind of open world, beautifully put together, fairly complex role-playing game, cracked the top 10 in India last year. And, you know, I think that's something which you know, we're really excited to see, and it just speaks to the more diverse nature of what we're seeing across mid-core as well. There's some more stats here on monetization, which I guess we'll get onto a little bit later, but I'm going to close this slide by talking about the cumulative MAUs, so monthly average uniques in this space. So for gaming, we're seeing about 2 billion cumulative MAUs for all mobile games in the last financial year. It's a huge number. And interestingly, about 358 million in the top 10. You know, I think what's also interesting here is that, you know, the assumption is there's a kind of power law which operates in the top 10 or even the top 20, right? So this idea that the top 10 or the top 20 is sucking the majority of engagement into that kind of vortex, but we're not actually seeing that. 358 million cumulative MAUs, nothing to be sniffed at in the top 10, but there is this, I guess, healthy diversity of content beyond the top 10, beyond even the top 50 that are actually seeing some great numbers, and you know, that's great news for developers in the room. So I'm going to pause here and hand it over to Salone.
Okay, thanks, Justin. So moving on, you know, we've given you a lot of data. We want to share some more trends with you as to what are some of the structural drivers, what are some of the paradigm shifts that are taking place from a technology perspective, from a consumption perspective, from an engagement perspective. And we've essentially mapped 5 key market trends that we've analyzed. The first is there's a structural shift in terms of technology which is driving gaming consumption. We all know the advent of 4G. We also know the advent now of 5G, and that's going to be a major driver going forward. We're seeing the transforming digital payment landscape driving propensity to pay. As per the RBI data, which was as of last month or so, 72% of transactions now by volume are now done by UPI, which is a real game changer in terms of driving payment propensity. There's an interesting trend that now we're seeing in terms of a desire for culturally relevant content. India first content, India themed content, India IP. Emergence of live streaming is again another trend that we've seen, and we'll talk a little bit about what behaviors those are driving. And then essentially there's also frontier tech, which is pushing the boundaries of gaming. But most importantly, let's talk about monetization, right? There has been a prevailing myth that Indians don't pay. As per data, that is now being proved otherwise. The average revenue per paying user in India is $20 per year. It's far lower than Western markets, but this is far higher than what we've previously even thought possible for the India market. This number is up already 11%, up from $16 last year. Now, certain instances in mid-core games, we're actually seeing gamers pay up to $30 and more per month on various mechanics, largely driven by in-app purchases. Also, moving on, in terms of, and I want to bring this trend to light, is the desire for India-based content, right? 80% of the surveyed gamers showed a proclivity towards India-based IP. This insight is something we've seen in other markets which have very strong embedded cultures, like markets like China, markets like South Korea, which is often the first sign of a market which is moving from import titles, where we're using foreign games, but now moving to a domestically vibrant market, creating its own IP. And this is now being reflected in policies, and this is now being reflected in mechanics that we're seeing even foreign publishers bring to the India market, whether it's holiday events which are themed to map Indian culture, or even the prevalence of Agent Raja in Valorant. All of these are now ways where we're seeing that demand for original IP, demand for Indianness, this sense of digital decolonization that is happening is taking place, and this is an interesting trend to talk about. And obviously a little bit about live streaming. We've seen live streaming is not just a form of entertainment, but it is also, gamers are telling us, it's a form of vicariously playing games and also enabling discovery of games, which was previously not really identified as a key trend. We'll move on to a fundamental question that we often see entrepreneurs and builders in the space face. You know, where's the liquidity? Where are the exits coming from? You know, we give venture capital, but what does it yield? And interestingly, we've seen that majority of the capital in the last 5 years that has entered into the India market has been north of $2.8 billion. Majority of that has come in the last 2.5 years. While a significant part of this capital has gone towards RMG plays, our research shows in the last year alone, there is a lot more diversity in the kinds of bets both strategic investors as well as financial investors are backing. Whether it's global strategics or whether it is local domestic VCs, the appetite for other forms of gaming, other genres is now fast emerging. And what it has yielded in the last 2 years alone, we have seen 6+ strategic exits, which are north of $750 million. We've seen 3 unicorns on a publicly listing IPO. All of this is now showing us that there's a healthy liquidity market which is possible, which will further lead to more capital in the ecosystem, which will further embolden founders to take bigger bets, bolder bets, and which can further drive liquidity, which is a flywheel that hasn't happened in India yet, which has now happened over the last 1 year. And to share a little bit about the survey that we did a pan-India survey of 2,000 plus smartphone users. And what we found was it was a very interesting 60-40 female split, which is again quite a surprising data point that 40% of gamers in India are actually women, and with a very even split between metros and non-metros. Unsurprisingly, gamer demographics skew younger. So more Gen Z, more millennials, median age of about 28 years. Interestingly, a significant portion of gamers are actually full-time employed professionals. Contrary to the thinking of that these are students, these are college goers who don't have much ability to pay, our research actually shows otherwise. This reveals a higher disposable of income and gaming now constituting a higher wallet share as part of the entertainment spend of now younger millennials and the younger digitally connected population. An interesting observation that we've also seen is in terms of player behavior. There were a assumption that a lot of developers have had when building games for India is that Indians are typically very tolerant of games. Now we discover over the last course of the year, Indians are actually quitting games because of ad fatigue. So it's something to keep in mind that Indians are no longer going to be tolerating ad after ad, and now it needs to be, they're moving and migrating and evolving towards in-app purchases. So there is a level of sophistication and a level of discernment that is taking place now in the Indian gamer, which is interesting for us. And of course, lastly, we've got the key motivations to pay. Potential to make money is indeed a key driver. But out of the 5 major reasons and motivations to pay are actually linked directly towards driving in-app purchases, which makes it critical for now the developer of today who's looking to build companies for the next 5 to the next 10 years to start including IAPs as a key monetization mechanic, because your audience, your user, your gamer is actually indeed asking for it. So, that's essentially some of the high-level insights that we had to share. I'll just give some closing words before we move to the panel. We did this annual India report because up until a few years back, India games landscape was a black box, right? There were narratives around the market that were different to on-ground data. We heard narratives that RMG is the only dominant gaming genre in India. We heard there is no IAP potential, that the TAM for paying users is non-existent, there is a lack of entrepreneurial talent, there is no liquidity. And these myths and misconceptions have plagued India and the growth of the Indian games landscape for a very long time. The Lumikai State of India Gaming Report is our endeavor to at least deconstruct and debunk these myths to a large extent. We as a fund have a long-term potential of the India gaming market. We have a 10-year time horizon, a 20-year time horizon, and when you supplement that with some of the macroeconomic tailwinds that are insulating the Indian economy at the moment, these are powerful catalysts. Needless to say, we're sitting in a country where we're the 3rd largest country in terms of GDP per capita per purchasing power parity. We're the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world. Institutions far smarter than us are telling us that the private consumption income levels are going to go from 2 trillion to 4 trillion, and that's in the hands of a young, digitally connected smartphone population. Everybody here can do the math of what that means, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a game developer, there's no better time to build. And if you're a financial investor, if you're a strategic investor looking for a new market, looking for yield, India has to be an imperative. You need an India strategy. So, you know, as it said, it's time for us to level up. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Salone. So we're going to open it up now to conversation with our panelists over here today. I think let's start with Prashanth. Would love to understand, so we've just got an overview now of some of the highlights from the report that we're putting together. The full report will be out at the end of the month. Would love to get a sense from you on some of the methodology and the processes behind how this report was put together, just for some context for the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. So as we set out to kind of look into this report, our objective was to kind of get into the discovery mode and then bring out what is actually the truth on the ground. So we said the best way to do this is a two-pronged approach, wherein we kind of bring in secondary research and primary research as such, both put together. And when we talk about primary research as well, we kind of got a top-down approach from the gaming companies and also a bottom-up approach. Let me dwell on that a little bit later. So now picking up the bottom-up approach, what we did is we kind of launched a survey using a market research agency on about 2,000 odd gamers to understand from them what is in it for them, what are they looking for, how much engagement do they do, what drives them, what bugs them. So what kind of, what is their asks? So understanding the details of them, who's the personality behind the gamer over there. So there are multiple questions that we kind of carefully crafted. You saw some of the answers coming in there. What is it that will take them to kind of push out money from their pocket? What is the desire for playing? So these kind of questions were put in, and then we kind of collected this data. And then this population size, again, we kind of broke it up from the metros. We had about 800 odd people, 880 odd from the metros. Then we had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, all kind of things we covered. We did face-to-face, a lot of the interviews were face-to-face to collect these questions. We also had a bit of online surveys to capture this as such. So again, there was a mix on that side of it, and whatever we got on it, we kind of crunched those numbers to get some of the insights. That is one part of it. The second part of it is talking to various industry bodies. We spoke to the associations, industry bodies, to get their views. How are they seeing the market? What are the impediments? What are the growth rates that they're seeing on one side of it? We spoke to companies to get their views. Companies, again, when we say there are game developers that we spoke to organizations which are kind of providing the infrastructure and technology for these gaming companies to get their views and then add up those as well. We kind of got a bunch of data from what is available publicly in public domain as such in terms of published annual reports and things like that. We also captured various insights from experts within Deloitte in the gaming industry. We kind of brought in global perspective by speaking to our global colleagues. We are also currently doing a report in the geography of Germany on esports. We'll be getting some data into that. We'll kind of put that into this as well. So this is all about the sources that we kind of put into the report overall. Then, when you talk about the time period, Justin briefly mentioned, we are looking at a period of April to March in this. So the period starting from 1st of April 2021 to March end 2022 is the period that we have tried to capture whatever data that we have on this side. There are a bunch of things that we went to set out to capture, right? One is the size itself of the market. Then what are the growth numbers that we're looking at, growth drivers which have happened till now? And in terms of a futuristic view, what are the events which are happening in the market which will kind of drive the growth as it goes forward? So hence, drive it up drive it down in terms of adjustment of factors towards that. So that was done on one side. And one large thing is, some of us would have benefited from it, some of us would have not benefited from it, is the movement of dollar rates. Last year when we kind of did this, Lumikai did this report, I think the dollar to INR rate was 70, and this time it's about 82. So if you look into it, while you grow, when you look at dollar number, it looks to be smaller. So last time's report, I guess, Justin had $2.2 billion as the market size. So what we did is we also kind of right-sized it and adjusted it for the thing. So we kind of brought the 2.2 to 2 at this point of time as the base to kind of arrive at the growth rate, so that as consumers of the report, you kind of get a right picture to this. So this is kind of effort that we did this. What you're seeing right now is an exec summary. You'll get a detailed report in about a month's time, 15 days to a month time, which will be put up in Lumikai's website. So that's the broad and short of how we went about doing this. So I guess that's it. Just
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prashanth. Deependra, I'm going to pass it to you. You know, you've been, obviously, from AWS's perspective, you see a lot that's happening in the ecosystem. In fact, most games companies are actually built around the Amazon infrastructure. What have been, I guess, your observations, your insights from an engagement, concurrency, traffic perspective that you've seen in the India market in terms of, let's say, the last year or so?
I think one thing which is very clear is the usage or the downloads or the time spent on games has increased massively. So I don't remember all the numbers in the report, but 15 billion downloads, that's massive. And that's only going to increase, right? So we work with multiple games companies across genres, which are real money, casual, fantasy, esports. Esports has a small base, but it is one of the fastest growing segments. RMG, of course, has been the biggest driver of monetization. And I think it's going to remain the biggest driver of monetization. But we are seeing new formats of RMG games being launched. And if I can consider fantasy to be a subset of RMG, right? What we are seeing is that earlier you were playing fantasy games only when the matches were happening. And this was a problem which the companies were trying to solve. Now they have got into some sort of NFTs for players. So not only there is gameplay, but there is also, NFT holding, trading, etc. Models which have been incorporated. The reality is that, for NFTs, if you're just buying or selling or trading NFTs, then the engagement and retention of players will be limited. But when you build a utility on top of it, which many companies are doing right now, that's when the engagement increases a lot more. So we're working with companies on innovative models in terms of, okay, you have acquired some rights, you have, built some NFTs, but how do you bring players again and again back to the same gameplay? And without diving too much details, I think we'll see a shift in how fantasy sports has been evolving and the gameplay. Honestly speaking, fantasy sports has not evolved since it was launched in India. More or less the gameplay remains the same. But now, with a launch of D3 and multiple other companies working on similar formats, I think we'll see a good shift in fantasy sports. Casual is always surprising, what comes out of casual and what becomes big is always very unpredictable. But 2-3 things which have remained, a hard bet is when there is a social interaction, right? When people are able to play with their friends, families, I think that's what drives the virality of the game. Some of the companies, they are one game which always remains at the top of the charts is Ludo, and multiple companies are doing various forms of Ludo. And the engagement and the retention that we have seen in that category is massive. And the beauty of casual games is that you can take a very simple game like Ludo, like, even Carom, and you can create avatars of that game. I don't mean metaverse avatars, but you can create, versions of that game which are so innovative, which are so engaging that, players just want to spend more and more time playing those games. So those 3 segments, are growing very well, and we are seeing some very good innovations happening in those. Esports, I think it's got a life of its own. It's an adjacency to the game segment, but with more money coming into the sector, I think that is changing. Sponsors are spending money, more tournaments are happening, and more people actually picking up esports, not just as a hobby, but moving towards making it a profession. I think that's driving the growth of the sector. There was a gap which was left in the Indian market by Twitch, by YouTube, and Twitch is biggest in the US, and I think that has been filled very well by companies like Loco, which is your portfolio as well. So we are very excited about that space as well. But one thing I'm always impressed about is the growth of technological innovation. So if you talk about that, earlier mobile phones, the smartphone penetration and cheap data rates actually ensured that games became available to everyone, and that's why we have 15 million downloads, to be honest. Now cloud technology is driving the next set of innovation. So it's become very easy for entrepreneurs, for founders, for developers to just conceptualize the game and start building it. All the services, all the solutions are available out of a box. So you want compute services, you can have them in a form of, game lift, which is purpose built for games, allows you to scale up and scale down massively, to cater to your demand. Similarly, you have AI/ML services, right? One is building a game, but how do you actually bring the player back in again and again back to the game? How do you actually ensure that the levels are designed, with the right level of difficulty? If the level is too easy, it's boring. If it's too hard, people drop off. How do you ensure that the game doesn't have a toxic environment? It's very easy for everyone to participate in that game. And how do you actually ensure that you are delivering a very personalized engagement and experience to each player? So I think AI/ML services have a big role to play. I can go on about that, but probably I'll stop at that.
Great. I'd like to move on to Rajesh. I see you've been reading the report as we've been talking, and as one of the OGs in the industry, as someone who's seen all the ups and downs, would love to get your thoughts on anything that's surprising that you've seen today, and also just generally kind of what excites you in terms of the market as it is today.
Well, clearly COVID has helped. So that is popping out. It's not said there, but it's really helped. Download numbers are crazy. I mean, from 6 billion to 15 in 3 years. That is insane. But what I also noticed was that the China download numbers are dropping, and that doesn't seem to, I see the approvals. Okay, that I understand. But I think for me, as someone who, I was young and foolish enough to start 25 years back, and I started saying that I'm going to make games for a market that didn't exist. Yeah. And so then went on to do whatever we could. But we always knew that when it takes off, it will take off, because there is just strength in numbers. We have a very young population, and it was just a matter of getting the right things together. I think with 4G, the geo effect, the smartphones penetration improving, now with COVID, and a lot of people spending. I mean, I have myself noticed around the number of elders who are playing games now and spending. They would grind, they would wait for 24 hours before they could start again, and now they are paying because they don't want to. That is very interesting. And the rub-off effect that it has in terms of improving the acceptability of games in the home. If your mom is playing, she can't say, don't play to the son or the daughter, which is it's happening in my home. My wife plays more minutes per week than all of us put together, I think. So, and that's just ironical, but that's true. But I think what is really encouraging to see is we always knew that people would play, but we weren't sure how much they would pay. And to see that they are paying, and I do think that there's a lot of lumpiness around who's paying and not paying, but so the average number still is very impressive, $20 a year. But the fact that it's happening and there are so many new paying people coming in every month is from what you guys have discovered. That is really encouraging, because 3 years back, and we would get asked this question a lot about how we would size the market, and we did not have much credible data to rely on those days. So I used to use this really simple method. I would say we are a fifth in size of economy as China. We are the same size and similar demographic, age profile, etc. So we should be at a fifth in size when that market reaches a stage of maturity. But we seem to be crossing that number, which is great, because a fifth in size would have meant we would be at around $4 to $5 billion, and kind of held that kind of a number for a while. But from what you are seeing, it seems that we are headed far more than that, which is great. So I think this is a very good time for developers who have ideas to get in. And of course, we haven't even started really seeing the potential of Web3 and NFTs, and I think there will be that thing to make money right now is limited to the mid-core, but with Web3, that is only going to increase, in a very big way. And play to earn is a very compelling concept for Indians, I think. And the metro, non-metro, in fact, from my understanding, I had always felt that the non-metros would be more. They do actually have a lot more time than people in the metro, and it seems to be bearing out, which is, again, very, very good. And last point is the local content bit. I've been saying this, and you can go back and look at my interviews. I was always saying this, that it will be a case of Indians wanting local content, because why would they not? You see the movie industry, you see the music industry, you see pretty much any content. Indians love Indian content, so why would gaming be any different? And I would always tell people who would be multinationals looking to come to India and they would do phone calls with me, I would say, just importing your games is not going to cut it. And I continue to say that, and I think your report is also bearing that out, which is really good to see. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So we've got just about a little bit more time left, so I'm just going to go around, and Rajesh, I'll actually go back to you. One line about the future of the Indian game industry that
it's finally happening.
Well said.
Waited for a very long time, but it's finally happening.
Well said. Deependra?
I think the future will be massively immersive. So we had MMORPGs like massively multiplayer and metaverse, AR, VR, multiple things are happening. But if I envisage a future, it will be a future where you have make-believe parallel worlds and people are able to experience games which they have not experienced before. And you don't just play with a controller or a mobile, your whole body is immersed, so massively immersive.
Fantastic. Prashanth?
See, if you had asked that, I would say it's as bright as the light shining on our face here. We can't see anything beyond it. So basically, it's not a question about whether the industry will grow or not, or what pace it will go. We're talking about 25 or 45. So that's the kind of question that we are looking at, the percentages of growth in terms of this thing. And then when you look into the one of the slides that you put up there, the funnel tells it all. It's 850 million of internet users, 700 or 750 odd millions of smartphone users, which both are yet to go up further in numbers. Then when you come to 500 million gamers, it is definitely that gap is to be there to have. And then from 500 to 120, when you're looking at paying, that's again a very, very big thing that developers would look into, the gaming companies can look into as growth opportunity. And then we are looking at what, $20 per month, year as revenue. I'm sure when you look at other countries and how the amount is spent in as such, it is again a tiny amount as such. And 8.5 hours of engagement, that's also bound to go up. So more people play, more ad revenue, more they spend, more revenue. So the future is definitely looking bright by just looking at that funnel itself and the overall macroeconomics as such. When you look at macroeconomics, there is growth happening in cloud computing, AR, VR, and various other things. And of course, the companies doing things to it, like you said, the content which is relevant to them, building in-apps as gaming operations, etc. Future is bright.
Awesome. My one line is, India's got game. So.
Yeah, I think I'll go a little big picture here. I think for me, I have firm conviction that India will be the next gaming superpower in the world. I'm very excited to see where the market goes just from a broader perspective in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think coupled with that, this is a developer conference. Someone alive today in India is going to make the world's most successful game. I don't know if you're in this room or if you know who that person is. If you do, please come and talk to us. But I firmly believe that the next decade is India's from a gaming perspective. So, time to level up. Yeah, so I think, guys, we're out of time now. We've just got about 30 seconds left, and we have run over already. Big thank you to all of our panelists who joined us today. Special thank you to Deloitte and to AWS, who are our partners on the report. The report will be going up, the exec summary will be going up on the website. You can ping us at any time. hello@lumikai.com goes to the whole team. And we will be putting the full report up on our website, lumikai.com, a little bit later in the month. I think that's basically it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be at the conference over the next couple of days, so if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, just tap us on the shoulder, and always happy to chat. Thank you very much.